Hello and welcome. You think you understand power. You have seen wizards tear reality apart with words older than empires. You have watched clerics channel divine fury that levels mountains. Perhaps you have even glimpsed the gods themselves, those radiant beings who stride across the plains like titans of living will. But there exists something above them, something so far beyond divine might that the gods themselves, those beings you worship and fear, are little more than children playing with toys. They do not truly comprehend. And tonight, you are going to learn about the being that even gods dare not name carelessly. The entity known as Ao stands alone at the pinnacle of all existence within the world of Toril and beyond. Not a god, not even a greater power. Ao is the Overgod, the hidden one, the being who exists in a category so far removed from divinity that comparison becomes meaningless. While gods squabble over portfolios and worshippers, while they wage wars and forge alliances, Ao watches from a vantage point that transcends such petty concerns. And you need to understand something crucial from the very beginning. Everything you think you know about ultimate power, about the nature of divinity itself, is about to be challenged. The origins of Ao are shrouded in mystery. What we do know is that before the current cosmic order, before there were gods as we understand them, Ao existed and established the fundamental structure of reality. Whether the Overgod emerged from primordial chaos or existed eternally, whether consciousness came first or the void, these questions have no definitive answers. Ancient texts offer conflicting accounts, and the gods themselves possess no certain knowledge of their creator's beginnings. What matters is the result. A being of incomprehensible power that created the framework within which all gods must operate. You will never find temples dedicated to Ao. No clerics channel divine power from this source. No paladins swear oaths in the Overgod's name. This is not because Ao lacks power, quite the opposite. It is because Ao exists so far beyond the normal relationship between divine and mortal that worship itself becomes meaningless. Imagine trying to worship the concept of mathematics or the laws of physics themselves. That is closer to what attempting to worship Ao would entail. The Overgod is not a being who desires prayer or sacrifice. Ao simply is, in the most fundamental and absolute sense possible. What we know with certainty is that Ao established the current cosmic order. The Overgod created the framework that makes divinity possible, the structure that allows beings to ascend beyond mortality and claim dominion over aspects of reality. This is not speculation, but observable fact. Before Ao imposed order on realm space, the divine hierarchy as we know it did not exist. Whether Ao created this order from nothing, reorganized pre-existing chaos, or inherited and refined structures from some prior age, the texts do not clearly say. What matters is that the current system, with all its rules and hierarchies, bears Ao's design. And with that architecture came rules. Absolute, inviolable rules that even the mightiest deity cannot break. These are not suggestions, not guidelines. They are fundamental laws woven into the fabric of existence itself. Gods can be arrogant, certainly. They can grow prideful and forget their place. But when they cross certain lines, when they violate the deep rules that Ao established at the dawn of the current age, the Overgod responds. And when Ao responds, gods die. Not temporarily, not symbolically. They cease to exist in a way that makes mortal death look like a pleasant afternoon nap. Most mortals go their entire lives without ever hearing the name Ao. Scholars might encounter it in ancient texts, usually as a footnote, a curiosity mentioned in passing. Even priests and clerics, those who dedicate their lives to understanding divine power, often know nothing of the being above their patrons. This is intentional. The gods themselves rarely speak of Ao, and when they do, it is in hushed tones with something approaching genuine fear. Because unlike mortal worshippers who might be punished or tested, unlike other gods who might be defeated in divine combat, when Ao takes action against a deity, that deity has no recourse, no appeal, no hope of survival. The nature of Ao's existence defies easy categorization. The Overgod has been described in the few accounts that exist as a presence, a force, a consciousness without fixed form. Some texts claim Ao appears as a luminous being of infinite light. Others suggest the Overgod manifests as pure darkness. An absence so completed becomes a presence. The truth is likely that Ao is both and neither, existing in a state that mortal minds and even divine consciousness cannot fully process. When you try to conceptualize something that exists outside the normal rules of existence, language itself begins to fail. But here is what you can understand. Ao maintains the balance. Capital B balance, the kind that keeps reality from tearing itself apart. Within Toril and the wider cosmos, there are forces of good and evil, law and chaos, creation and destruction. These forces must remain in equilibrium, not because Ao favors neutrality, but because imbalance threatens the very structure of existence. If one force became too dominant, if evil overwhelmed good or law crushed all chaos, the cosmic framework would collapse, reality would unravel. Everything would return to whatever state existed before Ao imposed the current order. The gods know this. They understand, intellectually at least, that they exist within a system, that they have roles to play in maintaining cosmic stability. But knowledge and wisdom are not the same thing. Gods are powerful beyond mortal comprehension, yes, but they are not infallible. They have egos, they have desires, they make mistakes, and throughout the history of Toril, there have been times when divine beings forgot their place, when they grew so arrogant or careless that they threatened the balance itself. When this happens, Ao acts. The most famous instance, the event that even common folk know about though they rarely understand the deeper truth, was the time of troubles. You probably know the surface story. gods walked the earth as mortals for a time. There was chaos. Cities burned. People died. Eventually, the gods returned to the heavens, and things went back to normal. But that surface narrative hides the real story, the truth about why Ao took such drastic action, and what it reveals about the Overgod's power and purpose. Before we delve into that cataclysmic event, you need to understand something else about Ao. The Overgod does not involve itself in mortal affairs at all. Ao does not care if kingdoms rise or fall, if wars are won or lost, if individual mortals live in prosperity or die in agony. This is not cruelty. It is simply scale. You do not concern yourself with the individual bacteria in your body unless they threaten your health. Ao views mortals with similar detachment, not out of malice, but because the Overgod operates on a level where individual mortal lives are too small to register. What Ao cares about is the structure, the system, the cosmic machinery that keeps everything running. Similarly, Ao rarely intervenes in conflicts between gods. Deities wage wars against each other constantly in the outer planes. They form alliances and betray each other. They compete for worshippers and clash over philosophical differences. Ao allows all of this because divine conflict within certain boundaries is part of the system. It prevents stagnation. It maintains dynamic balance. As long as these conflicts do not threaten the fundamental order of reality, Ao observes, but does not act. But there are lines. Invisible, unspoken lines that the gods know exist, even if they are not always sure exactly where they are. These lines represent the boundaries of acceptable divine behavior, the limits beyond which a god cannot go without triggering Ao's intervention. And when those lines are crossed, the Overgod's response is absolute and terrible. One such line involves the Tablets of Fate. These artifacts, created by Ao at the establishment of the current divine age, contain the fundamental laws governing godhood itself. They define what a god is, what powers divine beings possess, and what responsibilities they bear. The tablets are not suggestions or records. They are reality itself, cosmic law made manifest in physical form. They sat in Ao's domain, far beyond any plane that gods or mortals can normally access, protected by the Overgod's direct presence, and by Helm, the vigilant one who never sleeps. For eons, the Tablets of Fate remained untouched, their laws unquestioned and absolute. The gods knew of their existence, though few understood their true nature. They were simply part of the cosmic furniture, fundamental and eternal, but divine beings, for all their power, can be foolish. And in the year of shadows, 1358 Dale Reckoning, two gods made a mistake that would shake the foundations of reality and prove just how terrible Ao's wrath could be. Lord Bane, the god of tyranny, and Miakul, the god of death, stole the Tablets of Fate from Ao's domain. How they managed this impossible theft remains unclear. Some scholars suggest they exploited a cosmic loophole. Others claim they had assistance from beings or forces unknown. Baal, the lord of murder, was connected to their conspiracy, though his exact role in the theft itself remains a matter of debate among those who study this dark chapter of divine history. The exact method does not matter as much as the result. For the first time in the current age, the fundamental laws governing divinity were removed from the Overgod's keeping. And Ao's response was swift, absolute, and utterly without mercy. Every god, from the mightiest greater power to the weakest demigod, was cast down from the heavens, stripped of much of their power, forced to walk the mortal world in physical form. The entire divine order was overturned in an instant, and the gods found themselves subject to the very mortality they had transcended. They could be wounded, they could be killed, and many were, their essence scattered to the winds, their divine sparks extinguished forever. All because two deities thought themselves clever enough to steal from Ao. Only Helm remained at his post, forced to guard the empty space where the tablets had been, forced to turn away gods who came begging for passage back to the heavens. This is what you need to understand about the Overgod. Ao does not bargain, does not negotiate, does not offer second chances or gradual escalation of consequences when the fundamental rules are violated, when the cosmic order is threatened. Ao acts with a decisiveness that makes mortal justice look like playground squabbling. The time of troubles lasted for months in mortal time, but in terms of cosmic punishment, it was instant and absolute. The moment the tablets were stolen, every god was cast down. No exceptions, no favoritism. Even deities who had nothing to do with the theft found themselves mortal and vulnerable. Can you imagine the terror? You are a god. You have existed for millennia, wielding power that can reshape continents. Mortal worship sustains you. Entire civilizations bend knee before your name. And then, in an instant, you are flesh again, vulnerable to blades and fire, and all the 1,000 ways mortality can end. You walk among the mortals you once viewed from Olympian heights, and they do not even recognize you. Some gods adapted. Others went mad with the shock. And a few, a precious few, learned the lesson Ao intended them to learn. The lesson was simple but profound. You are not as powerful as you think you are. Your divinity is not inherent. It is granted, structured within a system that exists independent of your will, and that system has a keeper, a being so far beyond you that your mightiest powers are nothing compared to what Ao can do. The gods are not the top of the cosmic hierarchy. They are middle management, elevated above mortals, but subject to something infinitely greater. Ao could have simply destroyed Bane and Miakul, could have erased them from existence with a thought. But that was not the point. The point was to remind every divine being in existence that there are rules, and those rules are enforced. The time of troubles was not punishment aimed solely at the thieves. It was a lesson written in divine blood across the face of Toril, a reminder that would echo through the ages. And it worked. Gods who survived the Avatar crisis emerged humbled, more aware of their limitations, more cautious about overstepping boundaries. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. That is the next part of this journey, the deep dive into the time of troubles and everything it revealed. For now, you need to continue understanding what Ao is at its core, because the Overgod is not simply a more powerful god. The difference between Ao and even the mightiest deity is not a difference of degree, but of kind. It is the difference between a character in a story and the author who wrote it. Think of reality as a grand play. The mortals are the audience, watching and reacting to events they cannot control. The gods are the actors, performing their roles with passion and skill, genuinely believing in their importance. But Ao is the playwright, the director, the owner of the theater itself. The actors might improvise, might go off script occasionally, but when they threaten to burn down the entire production, the director steps in, not with actor-level responses, but with authority that transcends the performance itself. This is why Ao cannot be fought, why no god, no matter how powerful, can oppose the Overgod's will. You cannot fight the structure of reality itself. It would be like trying to punch mathematics or stab the concept of time. Ao does not exist on a level where combat is possible. The Overgod simply is, and what Ao decrees becomes reality. Not through force, not through magic, but through fundamental cosmic authority. Yet for all this power, for all this incomprehensible might, Ao is not a tyrant. The Overgod does not micromanage creation, does not issue constant edicts or interfere with every divine decision. In fact, for the vast majority of history, Ao is completely absent from the daily operation of the cosmos. The gods govern their portfolios. Mortals live their lives. The planes function according to their nature. And Ao watches, silent and distant, only acting when the fundamental balance is threatened. This hands-off approach has led some scholars to question whether Ao is truly conscious in any sense mortals would recognize. Perhaps the Overgod is more like a cosmic force, an automatic mechanism that maintains balance without true awareness or intent. But the time of troubles and other interventions suggest otherwise. The specificity of Ao's actions, the way punishments match crimes, indicates deliberate thought and purposeful action. The Overgod is not a mindless force. It is a consciousness, alien and vast beyond comprehension, but a consciousness nonetheless. What does Ao want? That question has plagued theologians and philosophers for ages. The observable answer is that Ao wants the system to function, the balance to be maintained, the cosmic machinery to keep running. But that feels insufficient, too mechanical. There must be purpose beyond simple maintenance. Some scholars suggest Ao is conducting a grand experiment, watching to see how mortals and gods alike develop within the framework of reality. Others propose that the Overgod is playing an infinite game, whose rules and objectives remain forever beyond mortal understanding. The truth, if there is a single truth, is likely that Ao's motives are simply incomprehensible to beings who exist within the system. You live inside reality. Ao exists outside it, or perhaps more accurately, as the container that holds it. Asking what Ao wants is like a character in a novel asking what the author wants. The question itself may not make sense from the character's perspective. But here is what you can know with certainty. Based on observable actions across millennia of divine history, Ao maintains certain inviolable principles. The balance must be preserved. No god can grow so powerful that they threaten cosmic stability. No force can be allowed to unravel the fundamental order. The relationship between mortals and gods must remain within acceptable parameters, and the laws written on the tablets of fate, before they were destroyed and replaced with direct Overgod oversight, must be obeyed, always and without exception. These principles define the boundaries of acceptable reality within Toril's cosmos. Everything else is negotiable. Gods can rise and fall. Empires can flourish and crumble. Entire species can appear or go extinct, but the fundamental order remains stable. This is Ao's gift and its demand. The Overgod built a universe where change and growth are possible, where beings can ascend to godhood and shape reality through will and worship. But that universe operates within rules, and those rules are absolute. You might wonder why Ao created gods at all. Why not simply rule reality directly? Why establish this hierarchy of divine beings with their conflicts and competitions? The answer, based on how the system functions, relates to balance and dynamic stability. A universe where one being controls everything becomes static, dead, unchanging. By creating gods, by giving them genuine power and autonomy within certain bounds, Ao ensured that reality would remain dynamic and alive. The gods compete and collaborate, their actions rippling through the planes and the mortal world, creating endless variation and possibility. It is an elegant system. Mortals worship gods and provide them with power through faith. Gods use that power to influence reality, to protect their followers, or pursue their divine agendas. The interplay between gods creates conflict and story, meaning and drama. And above it all, Ao watches, ready to intervene only when the system itself is threatened. It is not control, it is architecture. Ao built the stage and wrote the basic rules, but the actors improvise the actual performance. And you, dear listener, whether you know it or not, are part of that performance. Every prayer you speak feeds into divine power. Every choice you make ripples through the cosmic web. You might feel insignificant, a single mortal among billions, but you are a thread in the great weave of reality that Ao maintains. Not individually important to the Overgod, perhaps, but collectively essential to the functioning of the system. This is the paradox of Ao. The Overgod is both completely detached and intimately connected to every aspect of existence, detached in that individual events and lives, do not register on such a vast consciousness. Connected in that every atom, every spark of energy, every moment of existence occurs within the structure Ao created and maintains. You are not important to Ao as an individual, but you are part of what Ao considers important, the grand functioning of cosmic reality itself. As we close this first part of your journey into understanding the Overgod, hold this knowledge close. Ao is not an enemy, not a friend, not even really a being you can have a relationship with in any meaningful sense. The Overgod is the foundation upon which all else rests, the unseen hand that keeps reality from flying apart into chaos. And while you may never pray to Ao, never build a temple or offer sacrifice, you should perhaps be grateful that this incomprehensible consciousness exists. Because without it, without the order and structure Ao maintains, none of this would be possible. Not the gods, not the worlds, not you. Section 2. The time of troubles and the tablets of fate, the year of shadows. 1358 Dale Reckoning. You need to remember that year, because it represents the moment when everything mortals thought they understood about the divine order shattered like glass under a hammer. The gods themselves, those immortal beings who had ruled from their celestial thrones since the establishment of the current age, found themselves walking the streets of Waterdeep, bleeding in the alleys of Baldur's Gate, dying in battles across Faerun. And it all began with an act of supreme arrogance. Two gods, relatively young by divine standards, but ambitious beyond measure, conceived a plan that would have been laughable if it had not succeeded. Lord Bane, the Black Lord of tyranny and strife, and Miakul, the Lord of Bones, Keeper of the Dead, were the primary architects of the theft. These deities looked up at the cosmic hierarchy and decided they wanted more. More power, more authority, more control over the fundamental workings of reality itself. And they knew exactly where to find it. Baal, the Lord of Murder, who delighted in the ending of life, was connected to their conspiracy in ways that scholars still debate. Whether he assisted directly in the theft, provided crucial knowledge, or simply benefited from the chaos that followed, the historical record does not clearly establish. What is certain is that Bane and Miakul succeeded in stealing the tablets of fate, and this act would trigger the most catastrophic divine crisis in recorded history, the tablets of fate. You heard about them in the first part of this journey, but now you need to understand what they truly represented. These were not simple stone slabs carved with ancient text. They were the operating system of divinity itself, the source code of godhood. Every deity's name was inscribed upon them. Every portfolio, every sphere of influence, every grant of divine authority flowed from what was written on those tablets. To possess them was to hold the very definition of what it meant to be a god. And they were kept in Ao's domain, far beyond any plane accessible to divine or mortal beings, guarded by the Overgod's presence and by Helm, the Watcher, the Vigilant One, who never slept and never faltered in his duty, except he did falter Or perhaps he was deceived. Or maybe, just maybe, Ao allowed the theft to happen because the lesson that would follow needed to be taught. The exact mechanism of how Bane and Miakul stole the tablets from under Helm's eternal watch remains one of the great mysteries of Torilian history. Some scholars suggest they exploited a loophole in cosmic law. Others claim they had assistance from beings or forces beyond the known planes. A few whisper that murder applied on a conceptual level can kill even vigilance itself, which could explain Baal's involvement if he indeed participated directly. The method does not matter as much as the result. One moment, the tablets of fate rested secure in Ao's keeping. The next, they were gone, spirited away by gods who thought themselves clever enough to outwit the Overgod. And in that instant, the cosmic order destabilized. Divine portfolios, which had been fixed and immutable, suddenly became fluid. Gods found their powers fluctuating wildly. The careful balance that Ao had maintained for eons began to crack. And the Overgod's response was immediate, absolute, and utterly without mercy. Imagine you are a god. You have existed for thousands of years. You remember the first prayers spoken in your name, the first temples built to honor your glory. You have shaped the fate of nations with a thought. You have walked the outer planes as a being of pure divine essence, untouchable by mortal concerns. And then, without warning, without even a moment to comprehend what is happening, you are falling. Not metaphorically. Literally falling from the heavens, your divine form condensing into flesh and bone, your immortality stripped away like a cloak torn from your shoulders. Every god except Helm was cast down. The Watcher remained at his post, though whether this was reward or punishment remains debatable. He was forced to stand guard while his fellow deities fell, forced to turn away gods who came begging for passage back to the heavens, forced to witness the chaos that unfolded across Toril as divine beings walked among mortals in vulnerable flesh. Helm became the most hated deity in the pantheon during those months, despised by gods who saw him as complicit in their punishment, even though he was simply following Ao's command. The gods fell to Toril, and the world was not prepared for what came next. Divine beings, stripped of much of their power, but still vastly more potent than any mortal, found themselves in unfamiliar territory. They could be wounded, they could feel pain, they could die. Not the temporary discorporation that gods sometimes experienced when their avatars were destroyed, but true, permanent, final death. Their divine essence could be scattered, their consciousness extinguished, their very existence erased from the cosmic record. And Ao made it clear through the very nature of the crisis that any god who died during this time would stay dead. Think about the terror that must have inspired. You are immortal one moment, mortal the next. Every enemy you have ever made, every slight you have delivered to other gods, every mortal you have casually destroyed over the millennia, all of it comes rushing back as potential threats, because now you can be killed. Now you can be ended. And there are so many beings, both divine and mortal, who would delight in your destruction. The chaos was immediate and catastrophic. Gods who had never walked mortal earth suddenly found themselves in cities and wilderness, with no clear understanding of where they were or how to survive. Some adapted quickly, using their remaining powers to carve out temporary domains. Others went mad with the shock of mortality, their minds unable to process the loss of immortality. And a very few, began to understand what Ao was trying to teach them. Bane and Miakul, the architects of this disaster, quickly realized they had made a terrible mistake. The tablets of fate did not grant them Ao's power. They were not cosmic batteries they could drain for divine energy. They were records, profoundly important records certainly, but possessing them gave the thieves no advantage. What it did give them was the focused wrath of every other deity in existence, because if the tablets could be returned to Ao, if the crisis could be resolved, then the gods could reclaim their immortality and their rightful places in the heavens. And every deity who died during the time of troubles was one less competitor for divine power. Once order was restored, the hunt for the tablets became the central focus of divine activity during those terrible months. Gods formed alliances and betrayed each other with dizzying speed. Battles between divine beings erupted across Faerun, and mortal populations caught in the crossfire suffered terribly. Entire cities were damaged or destroyed. Thousands upon thousands of innocents died as collateral damage in conflicts between beings who had once been worshipped as protectors. And through it all, Ao watched in silence, offering no guidance, no mercy, no intervention beyond the initial casting down. This was the lesson, not just for Bane and Miakul, but for every god in existence. You are not as important as you think you are. Your conflicts, your ambitions, your divine politics, all of it is insignificant compared to the suffering you can inflict on the mortals who worship you. The gods had grown distant from their followers, viewing them as sources of power rather than beings deserving of care and protection. They had become complacent, secure in their immortality, careless with the incredible responsibility that comes with divine power. And Ao decided that lesson needed to be taught in a way that would never be forgotten. Mortals witnessed impossible things during the time of troubles. They saw their gods bleed. They saw divine beings begging for shelter, for food, for protection from other deities. The entire relationship between mortal and divine was inverted, and those who lived through it emerged with a very different understanding of what godhood meant. Gods were not perfect. They were not infallible. They could be afraid, could make mistakes, could die screaming just like any mortal. The mystique of divinity was shattered, replaced by a more complex and nuanced understanding. Some mortals took advantage of the situation. They hunted gods, either for revenge or for the sheer audacity of it. If you had been wronged by a deity's church, if your family had suffered because of divine indifference, suddenly you had an opportunity for retribution, and weapons blessed by other gods, weapons that might wound divine flesh, became incredibly valuable. The streets of major cities saw combat between groups of mortals hunting gods and other mortals trying to protect them. It was chaos on a scale Toril had never experienced. And gods died. Not just any gods, but major deities, beings who had existed for ages. Bane fell in battle against the young god Torm during a confrontation in the city of Tantras. The lord of tyranny, who had terrorized mortals for countless years, was struck down by a god of duty and loyalty. Both deities perished in the battle, their divine essences exploding outward in a cataclysm that damaged the city and killed hundreds of mortals caught in the blast. The Black Lord's essence scattered, his consciousness extinguished. Bane was gone, truly and permanently gone. Or so everyone thought at the time, though that is a story for later. Miakul met his end in the city of Waterdeep, destroyed during a climactic battle that saw his divine essence consumed and scattered. The Lord of Bones, ancient and powerful, ceased to exist as a functioning deity. His portfolio of death was left unclaimed, a gap in the divine order that would need to be filled. And Baal, whether he had been central to the conspiracy or merely adjacent to it, would eventually meet his own end as well, murdered in his mortal form. The ultimate irony for the Lord of Murder, if indeed he bore responsibility for the crisis, was to die by the very portfolio he represented. But others rose to take their places. Sirik the Mad, a mortal thief and assassin of extraordinary skill and ambition, found himself at the center of the crisis. Through a combination of luck, cunning, and utter ruthlessness, Sirik acquired the Tablets of Fate, not to keep them, but to return them to Ao, because he understood what the divine thieves had not. The value of the tablets was not in possessing them, but in being the one to return them to their rightful keeper. In doing so, he would earn the reward that Bane and Miakul had sought through theft: elevation to godhood. 4 months after the gods were cast down, 4 months of chaos and divine warfare, 4 months of mortals suffering, while their supposed protectors fought like children over power, Sirik brought the Tablets of Fate to Waterdeep, and there, for the first and perhaps only time in recorded history, Ao physically manifested on the surface of Toril. Not as an avatar, not as a projection of power, but as a direct presence, the Overgod made visible to mortal and divine sight alike. Imagine standing there. Imagine being one of the mortals or gods who witnessed this impossible event. The sky itself seemed to split open, reality warped and bent around a presence that was never meant to exist in mortal space. And there, manifesting with power that defied description, appeared something that eyes could barely process. Accounts vary wildly. Some witnesses described a being of infinite light. Others saw darkness, so absolute it became a presence. Still, others claimed they saw nothing at all, just a void in space, where where something incomprehensibly vast pressed through from beyond reality. Ao spoke, not in words that mortal ears could hear, but in concepts that impressed themselves directly onto consciousness. The message was simple and terrible. The tablets would be destroyed. The old system of divine governance was ended. From this moment forward, Ao would take direct control over the granting of divinity. No god would create another god without the Overgod's explicit permission. No mortal would ascend to godhood without Ao's approval. The age of divine autonomy was over, replaced by direct oversight that would prevent such disasters in the future. And then Ao did something that shocked both gods and mortals. The Overgod elevated Sirik to divinity, transforming a mortal thief into one of the most powerful gods in the pantheon. Not because Sirik was virtuous or worthy in any moral sense, but because he had demonstrated the cunning and ruthlessness that the vacant portfolios required. Sirik inherited Bane's domain of tyranny, Miakul's sphere of death, and Baal's portfolio of murder. He became a deity of immense power seemingly overnight, elevated by Ao's direct decree. This was perhaps the most important lesson of all. Godhood is not about virtue. It is not a reward for righteousness or moral perfection. It is a position, a role in the cosmic machinery, and Ao grants it to those who can fulfill that role effectively. Sirik was ambitious, ruthless, and utterly without conscience. These traits, which would be vices in a mortal leader, made him suitable for managing portfolios related to tyranny and murder. The Overgod does not make moral judgments about who deserves divinity. Ao makes practical decisions about who can maintain the balance. With the tablets returned and subsequently destroyed, with new gods elevated and old gods diminished or destroyed, the remaining deities were allowed to return to the heavens, but they returned changed, humbled, aware of their vulnerability in a way they had never been before. They had felt mortality. They had experienced fear. And they had learned that Ao was not some distant philosophical concept, but an active force that would enforce cosmic law with absolute and terrible efficiency. The mortals of Toril also changed. The churches lost some of their mystique. When priests claimed their gods were perfect and all-powerful, there were those who remembered seeing those same gods bleeding in the streets, begging for help, dying like any mortal. Faith became more complicated, more nuanced. The relationship between worshiper and deity shifted towards something more transactional, less blindly reverential. You prayed to gods because they had power, because they could help you, but you no longer necessarily believed they were infallible or always benevolent, and the divine order itself restructured fundamentally. Ao made it clear that future ascensions to godhood required direct approval. The Overgod would not allow the pantheon to grow chaotic again. Every new deity would be vetted, their portfolio carefully assigned to maintain cosmic balance. The age of gods casually creating other gods, of mortal heroes ascending through clever use of artifacts or rituals without oversight, was over. From that point forward, the path to divinity ran through Ao, and the Overgod standards, whatever they might be, would determine who could and could not ascend. The time of troubles lasted only 4 months in mortal time, but its effects rippled through the ages. It fundamentally changed how gods viewed their role in the cosmos. It altered the relationship between divine and mortal. It demonstrated conclusively that Ao was not a passive force, but an active overseer who would intervene decisively when cosmic balance was threatened. And it proved beyond any doubt that no god was too powerful, too ancient, or too important to escape the Overgod's judgment. You might wonder why Ao chose such a brutal method. Why not simply destroy Bane and Miakul immediately and leave the other gods alone? Why inflict months of chaos on the entire world? The answer, based on what the crisis accomplished, lies in what it revealed about the divine order. The gods had become complacent and disconnected from their followers. They viewed mortals as resources rather than responsibilities. They needed to be reminded that their power came with obligations, that divinity was a position of service to the cosmic order, not a license for unchecked ego and ambition. By forcing all the gods to experience mortality, by making them vulnerable to the very mortals they had treated so carelessly, Ao created empathy through suffering. The gods who survived the time of troubles emerged with a deeper understanding of what their followers experienced daily. They had felt fear, pain, hunger, and the desperate struggle for survival. This made them better gods in many cases, more attentive to their worshippers, more careful with their considerable power. It was a lesson written in divine blood across the face of Toril, a reminder that would echo through the centuries, whispered in theological debates, and remembered in the prayers of the faithful. The gods are powerful, yes, but they are not all-powerful. They exist within a system, bound by rules they did not create and cannot break. And above them all, watching with eyes that see across all of reality, is Ao, the Overgod, the Hidden One, the being who maintains the balance, no matter how much suffering that maintenance might cause. As the gods returned to the heavens, as mortals began rebuilding their shattered cities, as the world slowly returned to something approaching normal, everyone understood that things had changed forever. The age of naive faith was over. The age of divine accountability had begun. And it had begun because Ao decided that the cosmic order required correction, regardless of how many gods or mortals had to suffer to achieve it. The Overgod's first priority was, and always would be, the balance. Everything else, no matter how precious or powerful, was secondary to that fundamental responsibility. Section 3. The Architecture of Reality and Cosmic Order. You stand now at the edge of understanding something that very few mortals ever glimpse. The true nature of reality itself, the architecture that holds everything together, the structure that Ao built and maintains. This is not simple cosmology, not just a map of planes and their relationships. This is the fundamental framework of existence, the invisible scaffolding upon which all of reality hangs. And to understand Ao, you must understand what the Overgod actually does, what role this incomprehensible being plays in the cosmic machinery. Reality, as you experience it, is layered. The material plane where you walk, where cities rise and fall, where mortals live and die. This is just one layer. Beyond it lie the inner planes, realms of elemental matter and energy, fire and water, earth and air, positive and negative energy, all existing in their pure, primal forms. These planes bleed into the material, influencing weather and geology, providing the raw materials from which matter itself is constructed. And beyond the inner planes lie the outer planes, the homes of the gods, realms shaped by belief and alignment, where the fundamental concepts of good and evil, law and chaos, take physical form. All of these planes, all of these layers of reality, exist within a crystal sphere. Realm space, it is called, the spherical boundary that contains the world of Toril and its surrounding cosmos. Beyond the crystal sphere lies the phlogiston, a rainbow ocean of flammable ether in which other crystal spheres float like bubbles. Each sphere contains its own reality, its own worlds and planes, its own gods and cosmology, and each sphere, according to the cosmological models that spelljammers and planar scholars have pieced together, has its own Overgod, a being like Ao who maintains the structure within that particular bubble of reality. But Ao's influence extends beyond just Toril. The Overgod is responsible for the twin worlds of Aber and Toril, two planets that were once one, split apart during ancient cataclysms, and later reunited and separated again through cosmic events of staggering scope. Both worlds, both sets of divine pantheons, both collections of mortals and their histories, all of it falls under Ao's authority. The Overgod maintains the balance not just for one world, but for an entire crystal sphere and everything contained within it. This is the scope of Ao's responsibility. Not a single planet, not just one pantheon of gods, but an entire self-contained universe, a complete cosmology with all its planes and denizens, and the countless interactions between them. The Overgod must ensure that the elemental planes do not overwhelm the material with their raw power, must maintain the boundaries between the outer planes so that celestial and infernal beings do not wage their eternal wars across mortal worlds, must keep the gods in check so that their conflicts do not tear reality apart. It is a task of incomprehensible complexity, and Ao performs it continuously, without rest, without fail. The balance that Ao maintains is not a simple equilibrium between good and evil. That is far too simplistic an understanding. The balance is about cosmic forces maintaining appropriate relationships with each other. Life and death must exist in proper proportion. Creation and destruction must flow in cycles. Order and chaos must dance together in productive tension rather than destructive extremes. When any force grows too powerful, when any aspect of reality becomes too dominant, the system begins to break down. And that is when Ao intervenes. Think of reality as a vast machine with countless moving parts. Each part has a function, a role to play in the overall operation. The gods are some of those parts, certainly important ones, but still just components in a larger mechanism. Mortals are parts too, smaller perhaps, but no less essential to the functioning of the whole. The planes themselves are parts, providing the space and structure in which all else occurs. And Ao is the engineer who designed this machine, who built it from whatever existed before, and who now maintains it, replacing broken parts and adjusting calibrations to keep everything running smoothly. But here is where things become truly fascinating, and where our understanding moves from observed fact into theological speculation. Ao is not alone in the multiverse. There are other overgods, beings of similar scope and power, who maintain their own crystal spheres. This much is known from the accounts of spelljammers who have traveled between spheres and encountered different cosmological structures. But beyond this, ancient texts and fragments of divine conversations hint at something even greater. References exist to what has been called a luminous being, an authority that supposedly exists beyond even overgods. Whether this represents a literal entity, a cosmic principle that all overgods must follow, or simply theological speculation about what must logically exist at the ultimate pinnacle of reality. No one can say with certainty. What we can observe is that Ao, despite seemingly absolute power within realm space, operates as though bound by rules the Overgod did not create. This could imply oversight from above, accountability to some higher authority, or it might reflect self-imposed limitations, the recognition that even supreme power requires structure and constraint to function properly. Or perhaps it is simply the nature of reality itself, laws so fundamental that even overgods cannot violate them. Some scholars theorize that if this luminous being exists, it maintains balance not within a single crystal sphere, but across the entire multiverse, across all crystal spheres and the phlogiston ocean that connects them. If this is true, then Ao's absolute power within realm space would be delegated authority, permission granted by something even more vast to manage, a portion of infinite reality. It is a dizzying concept, layers of cosmic hierarchy extending upward beyond any ability to comprehend. But it remains speculation, however logical it might seem. No mortal has confirmed contact with such a being. No god has spoken clearly of it. We are left with hints and implications, with patterns of behavior that suggest constraints, but do not prove their source. Regardless of what exists above Ao, within realm space, the Overgod's authority is absolute and observable. No being can enter this crystal sphere without Ao's permission. Gods from other pantheons, deities who wish to extend their worship to Toril, Toril or a bear, must receive approval from the Overgod before they can establish any presence. This is not a formality. Ao has rejected would-be interloper deities, turned away powerful beings from other spheres who sought to expand their influence. The Overgod decides which gods are allowed to operate within realm space, and that decision is final and unchallengeable. This makes Ao the ultimate gatekeeper, the cosmic authority who controls which divine beings can access the worlds under the Overgod's care. And the criteria for approval are not always clear from external observation. Some interloper gods have been welcomed, allowed to establish churches and gain worshippers. Others, seemingly similar in power and nature, have been denied entry. The decisions follow some logic, some understanding of how each deity would affect the cosmic balance within the sphere. But that logic is not published or explained. Ao simply allows or denies, and the pantheon adjusts accordingly. The gods themselves, the deities native to Toril and a bear, exist within a structure that Ao created specifically for them. They have realms in the outer planes, domains where they rule supreme, and can alter reality according to their will. But these realms are not truly separate from the rest of reality. They are connected, part of the larger cosmology, subject to certain universal laws that even divine power cannot break. A god can reshape their realm, can make water flow uphill and fire burn cold within their personal domain. But they cannot break the fundamental connections that tie their realm to the rest of the planar structure. And between those realms, in the shared spaces of the outer planes, the normal rules of reality apply. Gods are powerful there, certainly, but they are not omnipotent. They can be challenged, can be wounded, can even be killed if enough force is brought against them. This is intentional, part of Ao's design based on how the system functions. If gods were omnipotent everywhere, if they could not be threatened or challenged, they would have no incentive to maintain the balance. They would grow lazy and tyrannical, secure in their absolute safety. By making them vulnerable, by ensuring that divine conflict is possible and potentially deadly, Ao keeps the gods engaged and careful. Some sources mention places where gods meet to adjudicate disputes among themselves. Neutral ground where the pantheon can gather to settle conflicts and decide upon punishments for deities who have violated cosmic rules. The existence of such spaces suggests that the divine order includes mechanisms for self-governance, ways for gods to police their own ranks without requiring the Overgod's direct intervention for every dispute. This would be another elegant aspect of Ao's design, allowing the gods to resolve most conflicts themselves, maintaining order within their ranks, only requiring the Overgod to act when they prove unable or unwilling to enforce the rules. Based on what we know of divine behavior, gods clearly operate under constraints that extend beyond simple fear of Ao's wrath. There are protocols, procedures, understood boundaries that deities respect even when the Overgod is not actively watching. whether these constraints are enforced by cosmic law written into the fabric of divinity itself, by mutual agreement among deities who recognize the value of order, or by structures and spaces that Ao created for divine self-governance. The result is the same, a pantheon that maintains some degree of internal order most of the time. The boundaries between planes, the borders that separate the material from the ethereal, the outer planes from the astral, all of these divisions are maintained by Ao's power. They are not natural features that arose spontaneously. They are constructed, deliberate separations designed to keep different aspects of reality from bleeding into each other in destructive ways. Without these boundaries, the raw elemental fury of the inner planes would scour all life from the material. The philosophical absolutes of the outer planes would warp mortal existence into nightmare. The negative energy that drives entropy and death would overwhelm the positive energy that sustains life. Everything would collapse into chaos. Maintaining these boundaries requires constant vigilance and adjustment. Planes shift and change over time. New demiplanes form spontaneously. Powerful magic can create temporary breaches or permanent portals. Ao monitors all of this, ensures that no breach becomes catastrophic, that no portal destabilizes the larger structure. It is work that never ends, a task that would drive any lesser consciousness to madness through sheer tedium and complexity. But for Ao, it appears to be simply what the Overgod is, the fundamental nature of this being's existence. You might wonder if Ao ever grows weary of this endless task, if the Overgod ever wishes for rest, for freedom from the responsibility of maintaining an entire cosmology. The question itself may be meaningless. Ao does not appear to experience time the way mortals, or even gods, do. The Overgod seems to exist in a state that encompasses vast spans of time simultaneously, aware of patterns across ages in ways that mortal consciousness cannot process. From such a perspective, concepts like weariness or desire for change might not apply. Ao is, and what Ao is includes the role of cosmic maintainer. There may be no separation between the being and its function. The gods, by contrast, very much experience the weight of their responsibilities. They grow tired of their portfolios sometimes, restless with the endless cycle of answering prayers and managing their spheres of influence. They make deals with each other, trading aspects of their portfolios, trying to find combinations that feel more sustainable or powerful. But these trades require Ao's approval. A god cannot simply decide to abandon the deity of winter storms and become the deity of summer sunshine instead. Such a change would affect the balance, would ripple through the worship and belief of millions of mortals, would reshape the cosmic order in ways that might prove destabilizing. So when gods wish to alter their portfolios, they must petition Ao, usually through actions or rituals, whose exact nature remains hidden from mortal knowledge, and the Overgod evaluates each request based on how it would affect the larger system. Some requests are granted, others are denied, and occasionally, Ao will mandate portfolio changes without any request, shifting divine responsibilities to maintain balance as conditions in the mortal world change. Gods who suddenly find themselves responsible for new domains, or who lose aspects of their power without warning. Understand that Ao has made an adjustment, has tuned the cosmic machinery to account for new variables. This brings us to the price of divine ambition. Gods who seek to expand their power, to claim more portfolios or more worshippers, to rise in the hierarchy of divine strength. These deities must be careful. There are acceptable ways to grow in power, and there are violations of cosmic law. A god can gain worshippers by genuinely serving them, by proving more effective or more worthy than competing deities. This is legitimate growth, power earned through fulfilling divine responsibilities. But a god cannot simply destroy all competing deities and claim their worshippers through force. That would be destabilizing, a violation of the balance that would trigger Ao's intervention. The line between acceptable ambition and cosmic violation is not always clear from the outside, and this appears to be intentional. Ao wants gods to be careful, to think about the consequences of their actions, to consider how their pursuit of power affects the larger system. A deity who is too aggressive, too willing to break unspoken rules in pursuit of dominance, will eventually cross a line. And when that happens, the consequences are severe and permanent. Not just a temporary setback, not just a loss of worshippers or a demotion in divine rank. We are talking about complete erasure, divine death from which there is no resurrection, no second chance, no hope of return. The gods know this. They have seen it happen. During the time of troubles, several deities were destroyed permanently, their divine essence scattered beyond any possibility of recovery. Bane, Miakul, Baal, and others ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. Their names remained. Mortals still remembered them, but the beings themselves were gone. And this was not the work of other gods, not the result of divine combat alone. This was Ao enforcing cosmic law, removing pieces from the machine that had proven too broken or too dangerous to repair. Except that some of them came back. Bane returned, resurrected through the machinations involving his son, and with what appears to be Ao's approval. Miakul found a way to persist as a vestige, a shadow of his former power. Even Baal, murdered permanently, or so everyone believed, left behind children who carried fragments of his divine essence. Children whose very existence suggested the Lord of Murder might one day return. And this raises questions about what Ao's permanent destruction actually means. Whether any god is ever truly beyond recovery, or whether the Overgod's judgments contain exceptions for those who plan carefully enough. The answer seems to be that nothing is permanent unless Ao wishes it to be. Based on observable outcomes, the Overgod allowed Bane to return because the cosmic balance required a deity of tyranny, Bane, for all his flaws, understood that portfolio in ways few others could. The balance mattered more than any personal judgment about Bane's worthiness or lack thereof. Similarly, Miakul's persistence and Baal's potential resurrection through his children were allowed because they served some purpose in the cosmic machinery, filled some need that Ao recognized, even if mortals and other gods could not. This reveals something crucial about how Ao operates. The Overgod is not vindictive, does not destroy gods out of anger or spite. When Ao unmakes a deity, it is always for systemic reasons, because that god's continued existence threatens the balance. And if circumstances change, if the balance shifts in ways that make a destroyed god's return beneficial rather than harmful, Ao will permit that resurrection. The Overgod cares about function, not about consistency or fairness in any mortal sense of those concepts. You live in a reality that is carefully maintained, deliberately structured, and constantly monitored by a consciousness so vast you cannot truly comprehend it. Every prayer you speak travels along channels that Ao created. Every spell you cast draws on planar energies that flow through boundaries the Overgod maintains. Every god you worship exists within a hierarchy that Ao designed and enforces. You are, whether you realize it or not, living inside a work of cosmic architecture so complex and so carefully balanced that its mere continued existence represents an achievement of staggering scope. And the most remarkable thing is how invisible this all is to you. You go about your life, face your challenges, pursue your goals, all without ever thinking about the cosmic infrastructure that makes any of it possible. The planes do not collapse into each other. The gods do not destroy the world in their conflicts. Reality remains stable and comprehensible. All of this is Ao's gift, the foundation that allows mortal life to exist and flourish. And the Overgod asks nothing in return except that the system continue to function, that the balance be maintained, that the cosmic machinery keep running smoothly. This is the true nature of Ao's power, not destructive might, though the Overgod certainly possesses that. Not creative force, though Ao built the current reality. The real power is in maintenance, in the endless task of keeping everything working, of making constant, tiny adjustments to prevent catastrophic failures. It is unglamorous work, invisible work, the kind of labor that only becomes apparent when it stops. And Ao performs this labor constantly, without recognition, without worship, without any of the rewards that gods receive from their mortal followers. Perhaps that is why Ao remains so distant, so uninvolved in mortal affairs. The Overgod is occupied with maintaining the foundation of existence, with ensuring that the cosmic machinery continues to function. You worry about kingdoms and wars, about love and loss, about the immediate concerns of mortal life. Ao concerns itself with whether the fundamental forces of reality remain in proper balance, whether the gods are fulfilling their cosmic responsibilities, whether the planes are stable and the barriers between them holding. Your concerns and the Overgod's concerns exist on such different scales that meaningful interaction becomes nearly impossible. And yet, there is a connection. Because you are part of the system Ao maintains, your life, your choices, your worship or lack thereof, all of it feeds into the cosmic balance. You are a single thread in an incomprehensibly vast weave, but even a single thread contributes to the overall pattern. Ao may not care about you individually, but the Overgod cares deeply about the system of which you are a part. In that strange, distant way, you matter to the being who created and maintains reality itself. Section 4. Divine Mortality and the Unmaking of Gods. Death is supposed to be foreign to gods. They exist beyond the mortal cycle of life and ending, elevated to a state where time itself loses much of its meaning. A god can be wounded, certainly. Their avatars can be destroyed. They can be diminished in power, reduced in status, humbled by more powerful deities. But true death, the final cessation of consciousness that mortals face, this was thought to be impossible for divine beings until Ao proved otherwise. Until the Overgod demonstrated that immortality is not an inherent quality of godhood, but a privilege that can be revoked. You need to understand something fundamental about how divine power actually works. Before the time of troubles, gods drew their strength from multiple sources. Worship was important, yes. The prayers and devotion of mortals fed divine power, strengthened portfolios, allowed gods to maintain their realms and perform miracles. But worship was not the only source. Gods also drew power from cosmic forces tied to their portfolios. The god of the sun drew strength from sunlight itself. The god of storms was empowered by every thunderclap and lightning strike. The god of death gained energy from every mortal who ceased breathing. These cosmic connections made deities largely independent of mortal belief. They valued worship, competed for followers, but they did not strictly need it to survive. Ao changed that. When the Overgod allowed the gods to return to the heavens after the time of troubles, after the tablets of fate were returned and subsequently destroyed, a new cosmic law was imposed. From that moment forward, gods would be far more dependent on mortal worship for their continued existence. Not just for power, not just for influence, but for survival itself. A god without worshippers would weaken, fade, and eventually cease to exist entirely. Divinity became tied to mortal faith in a way it had never been before. And this was intentional. This was Ao's solution to the problem of divine negligence and the disconnect between gods and their followers. Think about what this means. A god who ignores their followers, who becomes too focused on divine politics or personal ambitions, will watch their worship decline. As prayers diminish, as temples empty and priests lose faith, the gods' power drains away. First, they become weaker than rival deities. Then, they lose the ability to answer prayers effectively. Eventually, they fade from existence entirely. unmade not by violence, but by mortal indifference. It is a slow death, a withering away, and there is no defense against it except to actually serve your followers, to give them reasons to maintain their faith. This is perhaps the most elegant and most cruel aspect of Ao's post-Troubles cosmic order. The Overgod made gods mortal in a very real sense, subject to a form of death that they cannot fight or escape. You can battle another deity. You can defend yourself against cosmic threats, but you cannot force mortals to worship you, not genuinely. Fear might compel prayer, but fear does not sustain divinity the way true belief does. Gods must earn their worship now, must prove themselves worthy of devotion, or face oblivion. During the Avatar crisis itself, before this new order was fully imposed, gods could still die through violence while stripped of their immortality, and several did, permanently and terribly. You heard some of their names before: Bane, Miakal, Baal, but there were others, lesser-known deities who fell during the chaos, whose names are remembered only by scholars and the most devoted students of divine history. Each death was absolute in that moment. When a god died during the time of troubles, their divine essence did not retreat to a realm to reform. It scattered, dissipated, ceased to exist in any meaningful form. Bane's death was particularly significant because of how it happened and what it revealed about divine vulnerability during the crisis. The Black Lord, god of tyranny and strife, one of the most powerful deities in the Ferunian pantheon, was slain in single combat by Torm, a much younger and far less powerful god of duty and loyalty. The battle took place in the city of Tantras, in full view of mortal witnesses. Torm, knowing he was outmatched, knowing that Bane would almost certainly destroy him, chose to sacrifice himself to stop the Lord of Tyranny's rampage. Both gods died in that confrontation, their divine essences exploding outward in a cataclysm that damaged the city and killed hundreds of mortals caught in the blast radius. What this proved was that divine combat during the time of troubles operated under mortal rules. Power mattered, certainly. Bane was stronger than Torm, and would likely have won if Torm had fought for survival. But Torm fought for sacrifice, willing to die if it meant taking Bane with him. And that willingness, that commitment to duty, even unto personal destruction, gave the weaker god an advantage that raw power could not overcome. Bane died because he still thought like an immortal, still believed that his survival was guaranteed. Torm died because he accepted mortality and acted accordingly. The lesson was clear: gods stripped of immortality, but still clinging to immortal mindsets, were vulnerable in ways they did not understand. Miakal's end came differently. The Lord of Bones, ancient god of death, was destroyed in Waterdeep during a confrontation that saw his divine essence consumed and scattered, not simply dispersed into the cosmos, but actively destroyed through forces that recognized divine essence as something that could be ended. This was perhaps even more terrifying than simple destruction. Miakul's consciousness was extinguished, his power broken apart. It was violation on a cosmic scale, and it demonstrated that mortal gods were not just killable, but could be utterly unmade. Baal, the Lord of Murder, met his fate through assassination. The ultimate irony. The god who represented murder itself, who had orchestrated countless deaths throughout his existence, was murdered. Not in glorious combat, not in some epic confrontation that would be sung about for ages, but through methods that ended his mortal form during the Avatar crisis. His essence scattered just like the others, his consciousness extinguished, his portfolio left empty for someone else to claim. But here is where things become complicated, where the absolute nature of Ao's pronouncements reveals unexpected nuances. Bane returned. Years after his death, after everyone had accepted that the Lord of Tyranny was gone forever, he came back. His son, a creature named Iatu Exvim, who was part mortal and part divine, somehow contained enough of Bane's essence to serve as a vessel for resurrection. And when the time was right, when cosmic conditions aligned properly, Bane consumed his own son from within and returned to full godhood. This should have been impossible based on Ao's declaration that dead gods would stay dead. The Overgod's pronouncement was supposed to be absolute and unchallengeable. Yet Bane challenged it and succeeded. The most likely explanation is that Bane had prepared a contingency before his death. A plan so carefully constructed that it exploited the exact nature of how divine essence functions. Whether Ao foresaw this possibility and chose to allow it, or whether the Overgod's rules contained sufficient flexibility for such clever resurrection, the result was the same. A supposedly permanent death was reversed. Based on what we can observe, Ao permitted Bane's return because the cosmic balance required a proper deity of tyranny. Sirik had been managing multiple portfolios after the time of troubles, including tyranny, death, and murder. But he was not managing any of them particularly well. The Lord of Tyranny's return, whatever we might think of Bane's character, improved the efficiency of the divine order. This suggests that Ao values cosmic function over consistency in punishment. If allowing a dead god to return serves the balance better than keeping them dead, the Overgod will permit the return. Miakul also persisted in diminished form, though not as a fully functioning deity. The Lord of Bones became what is known as a vestige, a shadow of divine power that could be contacted and bargained with by mortals who knew the right rituals. He was not truly alive in the way gods are alive, not capable of independent action or meaningful influence over his former domains, but his consciousness endured in some fashion. Some fragment of what had been Miakul remained anchored to reality, trapped in a state between existence and oblivion. Whether this was his own doing, the result of desperate preparation before his death, or something Ao allowed for reasons related to cosmic balance, remains unclear. And Baal, murdered and scattered, left behind children. Dozens of offspring, each carrying a fragment of his divine essence in their blood. These Baalspawn, as they came to be called, were walking vessels of divine power, mortals infused with God blood, capable of incredible feats, but also cursed by their heritage. And the essence within them wanted to reunify, to gather itself back together. The implication was clear. The Lord of Murder had prepared for the possibility of his death by creating vessels that could, under the right circumstances, allow his resurrection. This was Baal's contingency, though whether he foresaw the time of troubles specifically, or simply planned for every possibility, including ones that seemed impossible, we cannot know with certainty. What is clear is that he created a mechanism for potential resurrection that did not rely on other gods, did not require temples or worship, but instead used mortal bloodlines as storage vessels for divine essence. It was brilliant and horrifying in equal measure, and it demonstrated that some gods understood the rules of existence well enough to plan around even the most absolute-seeming cosmic pronouncements. The question that haunts theologians and scholars is this: did Ao know about these contingencies? When the Overgod declared that dead gods would stay dead, did that pronouncement include unspoken exceptions for deities clever enough to plan their own resurrections? Or did Bane, Miakul, and Baal successfully hide their preparations so carefully that even cosmic awareness failed to detect them? The most reasonable interpretation, based on Ao's demonstrated power and knowledge, is that the Overgod knew and allowed it because the balance ultimately benefited from having certain portfolios properly managed. What we can infer from these events is that Ao's rules contain more complexity than simple pronouncements suggest. The Overgod operates according to principles that prioritize cosmic function over rigid consistency. If a supposedly dead god's return serves the balance, Ao will permit that return regardless of prior declarations. The rules are flexible when flexibility serves the cosmic order, but make no mistake, they are only flexible for Ao. Gods cannot simply decide to ignore cosmic law because circumstances changed. Only the Overgod has that authority. Mortal ascension to divinity represents another aspect of how Ao controls divine mortality and the composition of the pantheon. Before the time of troubles, mortals could become gods through various means. Powerful rituals, divine artifacts, the sponsorship of existing deities who could elevate their favored servants. The process was difficult and rare, but it was possible, and it did not require explicit approval from Ao. The Overgod had set up the system and then largely allowed it to operate, trusting that cosmic forces would maintain adequate balance. After the time of troubles, that changed completely. Ao took direct control over divine ascension. From that point forward, no mortal could become a god without the Overgod's explicit permission. Attempts to ascend through ritual or artifact use without that permission would fail, often catastrophically. the mortal might die in the attempt. They might be transformed into something other than what they intended, perhaps becoming a lich or some other form of powerful, but not divine being. Or they might simply find that the cosmic machinery necessary for ascension no longer responded to their efforts. This means that every new god who appears in the Ferunian pantheon after the Year of Shadows is there because Ao allowed them to be there. When Sirik was elevated at the end of the Avatar crisis, that was Ao's direct action, the Overgod choosing a mortal and transforming him into a deity. When Kelemver later took over the portfolio of death from Sirik, that transition required the Overgod's permission. Any mortal who achieves apotheosis in the current age does so because Ao has evaluated their fitness and granted approval. The criteria for approval are not published or explained. No cosmic handbook tells you what Ao looks for in potential deities. But patterns emerge if you study divine history carefully enough. The Overgod seems to favor mortals who have demonstrated exceptional capability in areas related to their intended portfolios. A warrior seeking to become a god of battle must be truly exceptional in combat, not just skilled, but legendary. A wizard seeking divinity in the sphere of magic must understand arcane forces in ways few others do. Competence and mastery matter to Ao more than morality or virtue. The Overgod also considers need when evaluating potential ascensions. If a portfolio is vacant or poorly managed, Ao appears more likely to approve new deities who can fill that gap effectively. If the pantheon is already crowded with gods covering similar domains, approval becomes much harder to obtain. This is practical administration. The cosmic machinery requires certain positions to be filled. Too many gods managing the same portfolio creates conflict and inefficiency. Too few gods leaves important cosmic functions understaffed. Ao balances these concerns when evaluating potential ascensions, and sometimes, from an outside perspective, the Overgod's decisions seem completely unpredictable. Mortals who seemingly meet all observable criteria are denied. Others who appear less qualified are approved. This unpredictability might be intentional, a way to keep both mortals and gods uncertain, unable to game the system or predict outcomes with confidence. Or it might reflect factors that mortals and even gods simply cannot perceive, cosmic variables that Ao considers, but that remain invisible to beings operating within the system. What happens to gods who die under the current cosmic order after worship became mandatory for survival? Do they scatter like gods during the time of troubles? Can they make contingency plans for resurrection like Bane did? The answer appears to depend on how they die. A god who fades from lack of worship simply ceases to exist. Their divine essence dissipates because nothing sustains it. There is no violence, no sudden destruction, just a gradual weakening that ends in oblivion. Resurrection from this kind of death seems unlikely because there is nothing left to resurrect. No fragment of essence preserved anywhere. But a god killed through violence, while they still have worshippers, while their divine essence is still strong and coherent, that situation contains different possibilities. Their essence might scatter, but it could remain anchored to reality through the faith of their followers. Given time, given rituals performed by devoted priests, given perhaps the intervention of allied deities, such a god might return, not easily, not quickly, but the possibility exists in a way it does not for gods who simply fade from neglect. This creates a complex dynamic in the current divine order. Gods must maintain their worship to survive, avoiding the slow death of irrelevance. But they must also avoid making enemies who might kill them through violence. And they must consider whether to prepare contingencies for resurrection, as Bane did. Divine politics becomes a careful balancing act between cooperation and competition, between maintaining your power base and not threatening other deities so much that they unite against you. And over it all, Ao watches, adjusting the rules when necessary, maintaining the balance that keeps reality functional even as individual gods rise and fall. You might wonder if mortals have any real power in this system, if your choices about which gods to worship actually matter to cosmic order. The answer is yes, more than ever before. Because worship is now directly tied to divine survival, your prayers carry genuine weight. A god who fails to serve you, who ignores your needs or proves unworthy of devotion, can be punished simply by withdrawing your faith. You hold a form of divine mortality in your hands every time you choose where to direct your worship. It is not absolute power. One mortal abandoning their faith means very little. But millions of mortals making the same choice, that kills gods as surely as any divine weapon. This is what Ao wanted, what the Overgod achieved through the time of troubles, and enforced through the restructured cosmic order. Gods are servants of the balance, administrators of cosmic functions, not unaccountable masters of creation. They exist to fulfill roles in the grand machinery and to care for the mortals who provide them with sustaining power. When they forget this, when they grow arrogant or negligent, they die. And unlike the old days when immortality seemed nearly guaranteed, now death is permanent unless Ao decides that the balance requires otherwise. The Overgod gave mortals power over divine survival, and in doing so, created a system where divine beings must actually earn their continued existence. Section 5. Beyond Toril, the greater multiverse. You have learned about Ao's power within realm space, the crystal sphere that contains Toril and a bear, the planes that surround them, and the gods who dwell in those planes. But now you must confront a truth that may expand your understanding of just how vast reality truly is. Realm space is not the only crystal sphere. Ao is not the only Overgod, and the multiverse extends far beyond anything the mortals of Toril typically encounter, stretching into expanses that make your entire world seem like a single grain of sand on an endless beach. Beyond the crystal sphere, beyond that invisible boundary that marks the edge of Ao's domain, lies the phlogiston. Imagine an ocean, but not of water. This is a sea of rainbow-colored ether, a flammable substance that exists between realities, connecting crystal spheres while also keeping them separate. The phlogiston has no up or down, no consistent direction or orientation. Ships that sail it, spelljammers they are called, navigate by methods that make no sense to those who have only known planetary travel. Time itself behaves strangely in the phlogiston, flowing at different rates depending on location and circumstance. And floating in this rainbow ocean, scattered across distances that defy easy measurement, are other crystal spheres, according to the accounts of spelljammers who have traveled between realities. Thousands of spheres exist in the phlogiston, perhaps more. Each sphere contains its own reality, its own worlds and planes, its own cosmology complete with gods and mortals, and the endless dramas that play out between them. Gray space, which contains the world of Oerth. Kryn space, home to Kryn and its unique pantheon of deities. Countless others, each a complete universe unto itself, each maintained by its own cosmic authority. These other spheres have their own overgods, beings like Ao who maintain cosmic balance within their assigned domains. But they are not Ao. They do not answer to Ao. They operate independently, managing their own realities according to their own understanding of what balance requires. And this is where you must understand the true limits of Ao's power. The Overgod, who seems omnipotent within realm space, who can destroy gods with a thought and reshape reality through sheer will, has no authority whatsoever outside that crystal sphere. If a god from another pantheon, from ancient myths or distant cosmologies, decided to enter realm space and establish worship on Toril, they would need Ao's permission. Without it, they could not enter. The crystal sphere's boundary would bar them absolutely. But within their own sphere, within whatever reality they call home, such gods answer to their own Overgod, not to Ao. The Overgod of realm space could not command them in their home realm, could not punish them for violations of realm space law that occurred elsewhere, could not even communicate with them except by somehow crossing the phlogiston and entering that other sphere, where Ao would be subject to that sphere's rules and that sphere's Overgod. This creates a multiverse where absolute power is always localized, always limited by cosmic geography. Each Overgod is supreme within their sphere and effectively powerless outside it. It is a system of checks and balances that operates on a level beyond anything gods or mortals normally consider. And it raises profound questions about how this system came to be, who designed this structure of separate spheres, each with its own Overgod, rather than a unified whole under single authority. Ancient texts and fragments of divine conversations hint at possibilities, though none provide definitive answers. References exist to what has been called a luminous being, an authority that supposedly exists beyond even Overgods. Whether this represents a literal entity that oversees all overgods, a cosmic principle that all such beings must follow, or simply theological speculation about what must logically exist at the ultimate pinnacle of reality. No one can say with certainty. The evidence is fragmentary at best, consisting of obscure passages in texts whose authenticity is debated, and occasional divine statements whose meaning is ambiguous. If this luminous being exists as a literal entity, what would such a being be like? How much power would something that commands overgods possess? The mind struggles to comprehend it. If Ao is so far beyond gods that comparison becomes meaningless, then a being beyond Ao would operate on scales that make even the overgod seem limited. We would be talking about layers of cosmic hierarchy that extend beyond any mortal or divine ability to understand. Realities nested within realities, like infinite reflections. Some scholars theorize that if such a being exists, it might maintain balance not within a single crystal sphere, but across the entire multiverse, across all crystal spheres and the phlogiston ocean that connects them. This being would monitor all overgods, ensuring that no single sphere becomes too dominant or too chaotic, that the multiverse as a whole remains balanced and viable. When an overgod failed in their duties or threatened the larger structure, this superior being would intervene, just as Ao intervenes when gods threaten balance within realm space. Others propose that the luminous being might be the multiverse itself, that reality has achieved consciousness and awareness at the highest level. Not a being in any sense you would recognize, but the totality of all existence aware of itself and capable of exerting will. Under this theory, overgods would not be separate from the luminous being, but extensions of it, like fingers on a hand, each managing a different portion of the whole while remaining connected to the central consciousness. There are even more abstract theories. Perhaps what appears to be a luminous being is actually just cosmic law, fundamental principles of reality so basic that even overgods must obey them. The appearance of a superior entity might be how mortal and divine minds interpret the experience of encountering laws that cannot be broken, rules that operate automatically without requiring conscious enforcement. In this view, Ao does not answer to a being, but to the nature of reality itself, to mathematical and metaphysical necessities that permit no exceptions. But all of this remains speculation, however logical or compelling the arguments might be. No mortal has confirmed contact with anything beyond overgods. No god has spoken clearly and unambiguously about such matters. We are left with hints and implications, with patterns of behavior that suggest constraints on Ao's power, but do not prove their ultimate source. What we can observe is that Ao operates as though bound by rules the overgod did not create. Whether this reflects oversight from a superior being, self-imposed limitations, or simply the inescapable nature of cosmic law, the practical effect is the same. Even the Overgod has limits. Bringing this back to what can be verified through observation and reliable accounts, let us focus on how Ao relates to other Overgods and other spheres. The relationship appears to be one of mutual respect and non-interference. Overgods do not invade each other's spheres. They do not attempt to expand their authority beyond their assigned boundaries. This could be because they are content with their current domains, or because they understand that such expansion would violate cosmic principles and bring consequences, or simply because it is impossible by the fundamental structure of how reality works. When gods from one sphere wish to enter another, they must negotiate. The god seeking entry petitions that spheres Overgod, and the Overgod evaluates whether allowing entry would benefit or harm cosmic balance within their domain. Ao has allowed some interloper gods to establish presence on Toril over the ages. Foreign deities whose worship traveled with immigrant populations, whose followers brought their faith from distant lands, or even from other spheres entirely. These gods operate within realm space under Ao's authority, subject to the same rules as native deities. And here is a crucial detail based on how interloper deities function. When a god enters a sphere that is not their own, they become subject to that sphere's Overgod completely. A deity from another pantheon in realm space would answer to Ao, not to their home Overgod. Their power would be limited by Ao's rules. They could be destroyed by Ao if they violated cosmic law within realm space. There is no diplomatic immunity for foreign deities, no special protection based on being from another sphere. You enter another Overgod's domain. You play by their rules, or you suffer the consequences. This creates interesting scenarios for gods who want to expand their worship across multiple spheres. They must essentially create versions of themselves that operate semi-independently in each sphere, each version subject to that sphere's Overgod. Or they must accept that their worship beyond their home sphere will be limited, controlled, always at risk of being revoked if the foreign Overgod decides their presence has become problematic. It is expansion with significant constraints, power gained, but also restricted by cosmic jurisdiction. The phlogiston itself is a space beyond any single Overgod's direct control. Ships that sail it are outside the immediate authority of realm space's rules or any other sphere's rules. It is genuine neutral territory, cosmic space, where different principles apply. Magic works differently there, often unreliably. The gods cannot easily perceive what happens in the phlogiston. It represents a gap in even Ao's awareness, a region where the Overgod's knowledge does not automatically extend. This makes the phlogiston valuable for those who wish to hide from divine attention. Though surviving in that rainbow ocean requires resources and knowledge that few possess, some bold theorists suggest that the phlogiston might be where the hypothetical luminous being dwells, that this space between spheres could be the domain of whatever oversees all overgods. If true, it would explain why overgods cannot control the phlogiston directly, why that space remains beyond their immediate jurisdiction. But this is pure speculation built upon speculation, unverifiable from any perspective within the spheres. It is an elegant theory that would explain observed phenomena, but elegance does not equal truth. What is certain is that Ao's power, absolute within realm space, means nothing in the phlogiston or in other spheres. The Overgod who destroyed gods during the time of troubles, who reshaped divine law and reorganized pantheons, is essentially without authority outside that crystal sphere. It is a humbling truth about the nature of even the most supreme power. Authority is always contextual, always limited by domain and jurisdiction. There is no such thing as truly unlimited power in the multiverse, only power that appears absolute within specific boundaries. This affects how you should think about Ao and the divine order of Toril. Yes, the Overgod is supreme within realm space. Yes, no god can oppose Ao's will within this sphere, but realm space is one bubble among many in a vast expanse, and Ao is one administrator in what may be a cosmic structure that extends beyond imagination. The gods of Toril are subordinate to Ao, but Ao may be subordinate to something greater, which might be subordinate to something greater still, or might simply be bound by cosmic laws that permit no exceptions. It is hierarchy or constraint all the way up, and none of it is as absolute as it appears from any single vantage point. Does knowing this diminish Ao in your understanding? It should not. The Overgod maintains an entire cosmology, keeps reality stable for billions of mortals across multiple worlds, manages the relationships between hundreds of gods, and does all of this continuously without fail. That Ao might answer to something greater or is bound by cosmic law does not reduce these accomplishments. If anything, it makes them more impressive. Ao is working within constraints, following rules or principles that may not be of the Overgod's own making, and still managing to maintain a functional and largely stable reality. The gods of Toril almost certainly do not fully understand the multiverse beyond realm space. They know other spheres exist. They are aware that their power does not extend beyond Ao's domain, but the true scope of the multiverse, the vast number of crystal spheres, and the possibility of hierarchies beyond overgods, and the questions about ultimate cosmic authority. These are likely beyond even divine comprehension. Gods think in terms of planes and planets, of portfolios and worshippers. They do not typically think in terms of crystal spheres and multiversal structures, because such thoughts are not relevant to their daily existence. For you as a mortal, this knowledge should inspire a particular kind of perspective. You are smaller than you imagined in terms of cosmic scope. Your world is smaller than you imagined. Even the gods you worship are smaller in the grand scheme than you imagined. Everything exists within nested layers of hierarchy or cosmic law that extend beyond any ability to fully map or understand. But here is the crucial point. This does not make your life meaningless. You still matter within your context. Your choices still affect your world. Your prayers still reach your gods. The fact that larger structures exist beyond your sphere does not diminish the reality and importance of what happens within it. And perhaps there is freedom in this understanding. You are not the center of the multiverse. Toril is not the most important world in all of existence. Ao is not necessarily the supreme being of all reality, but this means the pressure is off. You do not have to be cosmically significant on a multiversal scale. You do not have to affect all of existence to matter. You can focus on your life, your world, your relationships with gods and mortals, knowing that the larger cosmic structures will take care of themselves. Ao handles realm space. Whatever exists beyond handles the Overgods, and you handle your corner of existence, which is exactly the right scope for mortal concern. The relationships between Overgods, when they occur at all, must be mediated through the phlogiston, or through whatever communication channels exist at that level of cosmic hierarchy. It is unlikely that Overgods socialize or form friendships the way gods or mortals might. They are administrators, cosmic maintainers, each focused on their assigned sphere. When they need to coordinate, when something affects multiple spheres and requires multi-Overgod response, there must be mechanisms for that. But what those mechanisms look like, how decisions are made at that level, remains completely unknown to anyone within the spheres. There are legends of conflicts between spheres, of spelljamming fleets from one reality attempting to invade another, of gods trying to conquer foreign territories. These legends suggest that Overgods can come into tension, that their policies toward foreign entities might clash, but verified accounts of such conflicts are rare. Either they do not happen frequently, or they happen on scales, and in ways that mortal historians cannot properly detect or record. The multiverse is vast and strange, and much of what occurs in it remains forever beyond mortal knowledge. What you should take from all of this is a sense of perspective and humility. Ao is incomprehensibly powerful compared to you, or to any god you might worship. But Ao is not the final word in cosmic authority, or is at minimum bound by cosmic laws that the Overgod must follow. The Overgod operates within constraints, follows rules or principles, maintains order according to standards that may come from beyond. This makes Ao more relatable in a strange way. Not a friend, not someone you could ever truly know, but a being who exists within a system rather than standing completely above all systems. A cosmic administrator doing a difficult job, possibly under oversight, possibly bound by inescapable cosmic law, the structure of reality as nested spheres, each with its own Overgod, each operating independently, but possibly within a larger framework, is actually quite elegant. It prevents any single point of failure. If one Overgod faltered, if one sphere collapsed, the others would continue. The multiverse as a whole would survive even catastrophic failure of individual parts. It is resilient design, the kind of cosmic architecture that suggests either careful planning by something that understood the need for redundancy, or natural cosmic evolution towards stable configurations. And somewhere, in whatever space or state exists beyond individual crystal spheres, there may be something watching, monitoring all the spheres and all the overgods, making adjustments when necessary, ensuring that the multiverse as a whole maintains its balance and continues to function. Or perhaps there is simply cosmic law, impersonal and absolute, to which even overgods must conform. Either way, the practical effect is the same: order maintained across scales that dwarf mortal comprehension. You will likely never meet Ao. You will certainly never encounter whatever might exist beyond overgods. These entities or principles operate on scales so far beyond mortal life that direct contact would be meaningless at best and destructive at worst. But knowing they exist, understanding that cosmic hierarchy or cosmic law extends from your life up through gods and overgods to something beyond even that, this knowledge gives context to your existence. You are part of something vast and carefully structured. Your small corner of reality is maintained with great care by beings or laws whose scope you cannot fathom. And that is both humbling and strangely comforting. Section 6: Forbidden Knowledge and Future Interventions. There are things the gods do not speak about openly. Rules so fundamental, so deeply woven into the fabric of existence, that even mentioning them feels dangerous. You have learned much about Ao, about the Overgod's power and purpose, about the cosmic hierarchy or cosmic law that extends beyond any single world or pantheon. But there are layers beneath what has been revealed, secrets that mortals are not meant to know, truths that even the gods themselves may not fully understand. And now, as we approach the end of this journey into hidden knowledge, you must confront the deepest mysteries of all. The unspoken divine laws exist as a kind of cosmic understanding that gods internalize upon ascension. When a mortal becomes a deity, when they cross that threshold between limited existence and divine awareness, certain knowledge floods into their consciousness, not taught through words, not explained through instruction, simply known the way you know how to breathe or how to make your heart beat. These are the laws that Ao never writes down, never explicitly states, because they appear to be written into the structure of divinity itself. One such understanding concerns the naming of the Overgod. You have noticed that this narrative uses the name Ao freely, but among gods, the name is spoken carefully, with awareness that speaking it might draw attention. Not always, not inevitably, but there is a sense among divine beings that casual use of the Overgod's name is unwise, that it risks focusing cosmic attention in ways that might prove uncomfortable. It is similar to how mortals in some cultures avoid speaking the names of dangerous powers, worried that names create connections. For gods, speaking Io's name may actually create such a connection, a momentary thread between the speaker and the being who maintains all of reality. Most gods prefer to use titles instead when discussing the Overgod among themselves. The Hidden One, the One Above. These circumlocutions allow divine beings to discuss Io without repeatedly invoking the name that carries potential cosmic weight. It is not fear exactly, more like respect mixed with caution. You do not shout for your employer's attention unless you genuinely need it. You do not casually mention the king's name when his title would serve. The same principle applies at the cosmic level, but with consequences far more significant than mere social awkwardness. Another unspoken understanding concerns the nature of reality itself. Gods are apparently discouraged from revealing to mortals certain truths about how existence is structured. The fact that reality is actively maintained rather than simply natural, that the planes are constructed rather than spontaneous, that the entire cosmology is essentially a machine requiring constant upkeep. These truths are considered dangerous, not because mortals cannot intellectually handle them, but because widespread knowledge might undermine the faith that sustains divine power in the current age. If every mortal understood that gods are administrators in a cosmic system rather than supreme beings, worship might become purely transactional rather than reverential. And while worship has become more transactional since the time of troubles, there is apparently a line that must not be crossed. The gods also understand that Io is not omniscient in the way mortals often imagine omniscience. The Overgod is aware of vast amounts, certainly, can perceive divine activities across all of realm space, knows when cosmic laws are violated in significant ways. But individual mortal lives, the daily choices and struggles of billions of beings, these appear to fall below the Overgod's threshold of attention. It is not that Io cannot know these things, but that the Overgod does not monitor them unless they become relevant to cosmic balance. This creates zones of privacy, areas of existence that even supreme cosmic authority does not actively watch, and gods who understand this sometimes conduct activities in mortal realms that Io never detects because they are too small, too localized to register on the cosmic scale. Why are these truths kept hidden? Why does Io apparently allow gods to keep certain knowledge from mortals, when transparency might seem to serve honesty better? The answer, based on how the system functions, relates to how divine power works in the current age. Since the time of troubles, worship has been essential for divine survival. But worship of the kind that sustains divinity requires a certain degree of mystery, a sense that gods are fundamentally different from, and in some way superior to mortals. If all the mechanisms were revealed, if every secret was exposed, gods would become too mundane, too understandable. They would be powerful beings, certainly, but perhaps not worthy of the kind of devoted faith that sustains divinity. The mystery is not deception for its own sake. It is necessary separation, the distance that makes reverence possible. But there have been moments when the veil slipped, when mortals glimpsed more than they were supposed to see. The time of troubles was one such moment. For 4 months, mortals saw gods bleeding in the streets, watched them beg for help, witnessed divine beings dying like any mortal might die. The mystery was shattered for an entire generation. Churches lost credibility. Faith became complicated and conditional, and divine power fluctuated wildly as worship patterns shifted in response to revealed truth. Ao allowed this, perhaps even intended it as part of the lesson being taught. But the aftermath required careful management. Gods had to rebuild their mystique while also being more accountable to their followers. It was a difficult balance, and some deities managed it better than others. The second sundering represents another moment when cosmic truth became partially visible to mortal awareness, beginning around the year 1487 Dale Reckoning, and extending over several years. Reality itself underwent massive changes. The worlds of Bear and Toril, which had been partially exchanged during the catastrophe known as the Spell Plague decades earlier, were separated once again. Divine portfolios shifted as gods who had been merged or altered were restored to something closer to their previous forms. The structure of magic, which had been fundamentally changed when the goddess Mystra died and the weave collapsed, was restored to something resembling its previous function. All of this happened over a period of years, and those who were paying attention realized that everything they thought was solid and permanent was actually contingent, subject to revision by powers beyond mortal control or comprehension. Mortals experienced this as a time of chaos and wonder. Land masses shifted position. Cities that had been destroyed in the Spell Plague reappeared. People who had been lost were sometimes returned. The fabric of reality became visibly mutable, and those who studied these events understood that the world was not a fixed stage, but a carefully maintained construct. It was both terrifying and enlightening, but the deeper truth of the second sundering is what it revealed about Ao's willingness to intervene when necessary. The Overgod does not change reality casually, does not reshape the cosmic order without significant reason. The fact that such dramatic intervention occurred suggests that something had gone wrong, that the balance had been threatened in ways that required direct action. Based on observable outcomes, we can infer that Ao viewed the preceding centuries' changes as problematic enough to require correction. The Spell Plague of 1385 Dale Reckoning had caused massive disruption. The goddess Mystra, who maintained the weave of magic, had been murdered by the god Cyric at the urging of Shar, goddess of darkness. The weave collapsed, causing catastrophic magical disasters across Toril. Parts of Bear and Toril were exchanged, bringing foreign lands and peoples into Faerun, while sending portions of Toril elsewhere. Gods died, merged, or transformed, the divine order became confused and unstable. Magic itself functioned differently, less reliably. For decades, this new configuration persisted. Gods and mortals adapted to the changes. New power structures emerged. But apparently, from Ao's perspective, the situation was not sustainable. The balance was not being properly maintained. The cosmic machinery was not functioning as it should, and so the Overgod acted, spending years carefully restructuring reality, separating the worlds, restoring divine identities, rebuilding the weave of magic. It was cosmic course correction on a staggering scale. This raises uncomfortable questions about what might trigger future interventions. If the second sundering was necessary to correct problems that developed over a century, what problems might arise that would require a third such event, or something even more drastic? The gods know more about this than they reveal publicly. They understand that the second sundering was Ao's response to instabilities that threatened cosmic balance, but they do not speak openly about how close reality came to more serious problems, how near the cosmic machinery came to failures that would have required even more dramatic intervention. Could it happen again? Could Ao decide that another fundamental restructuring of reality is necessary? The answer, based on the Overgod's demonstrated willingness to act, is absolutely yes. Ao does not consult with gods or mortals before making such decisions. If the balance requires intervention, intervention will occur regardless of how disruptive it might be to individual lives or civilizations. This is the sobering truth that weighs on those gods thoughtful enough to consider it. Their portfolios might be erased or redistributed. Their worshippers might be affected by reality-altering changes. They themselves might be unmade if cosmic stability requires it. There are signs that careful observers watch for, indicators that cosmic intervention might be approaching. When divine portfolios become too concentrated in too few gods, when the pantheon loses necessary diversity and specialization, that suggests potential instability. When worship patterns shift too dramatically, when entire populations abandon faith or convert en masse to new deities, that creates fluctuations in divine power that could threaten balance. When magic becomes too powerful or too restricted, when the weave, or whatever framework governs arcane power, starts to show signs of strain, that signals potential crisis. And when the boundaries between planes weaken, when too many portals open or too much planar bleeding occurs, that threatens the fundamental architecture of reality. Currently, in the years following the second sundering, things appear relatively stable. The divine order has settled into recognizable patterns. Worship flows to gods in more or less predictable ways. Magic functions reliably within understood parameters. The planes remain properly separate and distinct. But stability is always temporary in a system as complex as the one Ao maintains. New stresses will inevitably develop. New imbalances will emerge. And eventually, the Overgod will need to act again. What might that action look like? Another time of troubles seems unlikely. That particular lesson has been taught and learned. The gods understand their dependence on mortal worship and their accountability to the cosmic order. Repeating that crisis would serve no additional purpose. But there are other tools in Ao's arsenal. Other ways the Overgod might intervene to correct cosmic imbalance. Portfolios could be forcibly redistributed without warning. New gods could be elevated from mortal ranks to fill gaps in the divine hierarchy. Entire planes could be restructured or their relationships altered. The fundamental laws governing how divine power functions could be rewritten. The unpredictability is part of the design. If gods knew exactly how and when Ao would intervene, they could plan around it, could potentially game the system to avoid consequences by keeping the mechanisms and timing uncertain. The Overgod ensures that gods must always be cautious, must always consider how their actions affect cosmic balance, because they never know when those actions might trigger intervention. It is governance through uncertainty, and it appears to be effective at keeping divine beings mindful of their responsibilities. For you as a mortal, what does all of this mean? How should you live your life knowing that reality itself is maintained by a being who might restructure everything if cosmic balance requires it? The answer is surprisingly straightforward. Live as you would anyway. Your choices matter within your context. Your relationships, your goals, your struggles and triumphs are all real and meaningful, even if they occur within a framework that could theoretically be altered. The possibility of cosmic intervention does not diminish the reality of your daily existence. It just adds perspective, reminds you that the stage on which you perform is itself part of a larger story. Worship the gods if you choose, but understand what you are doing. You are not just praising powerful beings. You are participating in the mechanism that keeps those beings alive, that maintains the cosmic order, that ultimately serves the balance that Ao guards so carefully. Your prayers matter not just to the God who receives them, but to the entire structure of divine power. You are, in a very real sense, helping to maintain reality itself through your faith. That is a profound responsibility and a remarkable power for beings as small and mortal as any of the races that populate Toril. Question the gods when necessary. They are not infallible. They make mistakes. They can be petty, short-sighted, even cruel. But they are also the beings who channel cosmic forces, who manage aspects of reality that would overwhelm mortal consciousness. So question, but with awareness of the genuine service that most deities provide. The relationship between mortal and divine should be a partnership of sorts, not blind servitude or cynical transaction. Both sides have roles to play in maintaining the balance, and both sides should take those roles seriously. Seek knowledge, but be prepared for what you find. The deeper you dig into cosmic truth, the more you realize how much you do not and cannot know. There are mysteries that cannot be solved, questions that have no accessible answers, truths that mortal minds cannot fully process. The fact that Ao exists and maintains reality is knowable. How the Overgod does it, what the being's true nature is, what it thinks or wants or feels, if those concepts even apply, these remain forever beyond mortal reach. And that is acceptable. You do not need to understand everything to live meaningfully within the system. Remember that you are part of something vast. Your world is maintained by an Overgod who may answer to something greater, or may be bound by cosmic laws that permit no exceptions. The gods you worship are subordinate to Ao. Ao operates within constraints of some kind. And beyond that, the structure of reality extends into abstractions and hierarchies that have no clear endpoint, but all of that vast machinery exists, in part, to make your life possible, to give you a stable reality in which to exist, to provide structure and meaning to existence. You are not the center of the cosmos, but you are connected to everything that is, and that connection matters. The future will bring changes. Ao will intervene again when the Overgod deems it necessary. Gods will rise and fall according to the needs of cosmic balance. Mortals will worship and abandon faith in patterns that reshape divine power. Reality will continue to be a dynamic, changing thing, because that is what Ao designed it to be, or what cosmic law requires it to be, not static and dead, but alive and evolving within the boundaries of fundamental order. And you get to participate in that evolution, to make choices that ripple through reality in ways you may never fully understand, but which matter nonetheless. So live boldly, worship carefully, question constantly, seek knowledge while accepting that some truths are beyond reach. Be aware of the cosmic machinery that surrounds you, but do not let that awareness paralyze you with feelings of insignificance. You matter within your context, and your context is ultimately maintained by the most powerful being in your sphere of reality, operating according to principles or oversight that extend even beyond that power. That should give you confidence, not despair, comfort, not terror, because Ao, for all that incomprehensible might, is not your enemy. The Overgod is the gardener who maintains the garden in which you grow. Distant, yes, unconcerned with individual flowers, perhaps, but deeply invested in ensuring that the garden as a whole remains healthy and viable. And with that knowledge, with everything you have learned about the being who stands above all gods, who maintains the balance that keeps reality from unraveling, who operates under constraints or oversight that extend into cosmic mysteries beyond mortal comprehension, you are better prepared to understand your place in existence, not as the center, but as a meaningful part, not as the most important thing, but as something that contributes to the greater whole. And that is enough. That is more than enough. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore of Ao, the Overgod who maintains reality itself, please consider subscribing to this channel. There are so many more mysteries to explore, so many corners of hidden knowledge to illuminate. like this video to help others find this information. Share it with those who seek to understand the cosmic machinery that surrounds us all. And remember, the gods may be powerful, but they are not the final word. Above them stands Ao. Above or around Ao exist constraints, and perhaps beings or principles even greater. And somewhere in that vast structure, there is room for you to matter, to make choices that ripple through reality in ways both small and profound. Thank you for joining me on this journey into forbidden knowledge. Until next time, may you walk carefully in the shadow of powers beyond comprehension.